All right. Hello, coffee makers, not coffee takers. I am Dr. Joseph J. Miller Jr. Fresno Nash and I are your hosts of the Cyber Coffee Hour, two Mount Vernon products sharing our experiences and stories and those of our amazing guests. We aim to share knowledge, elevate understanding, and foster a sense of belonging in this vast cyberspace. So for today's show, we'll have a coffee chat with the founder and managing principal of Windsor Strategy, Henry Stoever, to learn more about him, his risk mitigation approach, his coffee preferences, and what he plans for the future. All right. So Henry Stoever is a strategic, outcomes-focused business leader who has served as a CEO and CMO with two member-centric board governance-focused associations, and he has led business development, communications, marketing, and partnership creation teams with four public companies in the information solutions, telecommunications, and consumer packaged goods industries. Earlier in Stevens' career, he launched StudentLoans.com, a leading originator of private and federally guaranteed student loans. He served as VP of Marketing for the CoStar Group, Senior Director of Vertical Marketing for Nextel Communications, Director of Marketing and Business Development of LexisNexis, and Senior Brand Manager for Kraft Foods. After graduating from the United States Naval Academy with a BS in economics, Henry spent 5 years in the United States Marine Corps as an infantry officer. Henry earned a Master of Business Administration from Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management with an emphasis on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Henry's current board experience includes serving on the boards of Cycurion Incorporated, a private cybersecurity company, the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation, and the United States Naval Academy Athletic and Scholarship Programs. Previously, Stoever served on the board of Boulder Crest Foundation and as a board advisor for the United Arab Emirates University. Henry Stoever, welcome to the Cyber Coffee Hour.
Dr. Joseph, thank you so much for having me here this morning, and I look forward to sharing a few thoughts from my experience with your guests.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. And I appreciate you taking the time. So, so I guess as we, get started again, we're just, keeping it chill, just relax, just two guys having some coffee together. And, but I guess before we really get into it, I mean, like, what are some of the things you have going on as of late?
Well, recently, about 6-8 months ago, I started a company called Windsor Strategy. And that's part of my role serving as a principal with the Brentwood Advisory Group, where we serve as interim and fractional practitioners to help CEOs and their leadership teams accelerate growth. We also fill short-term needs. But at the end of the day, one of my beliefs is that culture nourishes strategy. Now, that's kind of the opposite of what you may have heard Peter Drucker say 20 some years ago when he said culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I look at it and say culture nourishes strategy, because he was correct. Anyway, my clients and I are really focused on nourishing strategy through culture. We also work on what I call the 3 A's: assessing, aligning, and accelerating. And the other thing I'm going to talk a little bit about more later is the 3 R's about rehearsing, recovering, and responding. So at the end of the day, thank you, Dr. Joseph, for having me join your show today. And I look forward to your questions to inform your audience. Take it. Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Yeah, Henry. So I definitely, like I said, I was looking forward to this conversation with you, especially given our mutual connection. That was pretty much the glue that put us together. So just from my research and just learning about you, one of the things with your extensive experience as CEO and also a CMO, the roles that you served in across various industries, how do you align business strategies with customer needs and market trends to drive growth and exceed stakeholders' expectations?
Great question, Dr. Joseph. Thanks for teeing that up. There's one key word I believe that was in your question, and that is one of the words that I used when I responded to your introduction, and that's align. One of the colleagues that I worked with for years at AGB used alignment extensively, because whether you're talking about a board and a president, his or her leadership team, but to your question around customers and aligning customers' expectations with the organization, I think there's four key elements to establishing that alignment. And I use an acronym or four key letters to share with you. And it's what I call my TCPS approach to leadership.
Okay.
That TCPS, those four words: teams, customers, products, and strategies. So I know you asked me about how to align organizations with the customers, and the C is the second of the four letters. But I think the first part is teams, because at the end of the day, regardless of the type of organization, whether it's a public company, a private company, a nonprofit organization, or a government, all of those organizations are run or operated through and with people, and those people collectively form teams, and those teams in the aggregate form an organization. So I'm using this bottoms up approach. Sorry for me moving my hands, but I'm using
No,
this
you're
bottom
good.
up approach because you mentioned way back in the day I was in the Marine Corps, and in the Marine Corps, everything is built on fours. You have four people in a fire team, you have four fire teams in a squad, you have four squads in a platoon, company, battalion, division, etc. And so I think it's really important for all leaders to start with teams. Number two, around the teams, those teams, I believe, should be growth oriented. They can be growth oriented around different metrics, whether they're financial metrics or non financial metrics. And they also, whether that's service, revenue, margin, things of that nature. So they have to be growth minded. Yes, it's great for people to be service oriented, but at the end of the day, I believe, as one of my professors told me way back in the day, people in organizations, especially in businesses, it's all about more, better, faster. And say that: faster, faster, faster.
Right.
That's the key to success: is more, better, faster. So that's teams. Number two, those teams should be relentlessly focused on deepening their understanding of the customer's expectations, motivations, and priorities. So I know your question is about how to align organizations with the customer, and I've been able to do that across packaged goods, solutions, commercial real estate information, student loans, governance, etc. But it comes from establishing these growth-minded teams that are focused on deepening their understanding of customers' motivations and priorities. So once those teams deepen their understanding, which is an ongoing journey, by the way, it doesn't
Right.
stop. It's an ongoing journey. They then need to put together and develop products and services, whether those are analog, digital, hard copy, whatever the products and solutions are. Those products and solutions need to address the customer's motivations and priorities. Once those are done, they also need to be then deployed into the marketplace through a data-informed, inclusively developed strategy. Now, some people might say, I got you with the teams and the customer. Maybe the strategy should come in front of the products. I'm not going to kind of argue around the order, but those four elements, Dr. Joseph, are how I've been able to consistently deliver results that exceed expectations with my teams. Again, it's not me. It's me or my teams and I. That we are together focused on deepening our customer, developing world-class products and services, and delivering them through inclusive strategies. So remember, at the front end, I said a phrase. I said, culture nourishes strategies.
Right.
Because I am so focused on that, I emphasize the we and my teams and I all the time. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that I learned in the Marine Corps was about leadership. And it's not like I learned it only in the Marine Corps, but leadership is a skill that's developed and nourished over time. But I genuinely believe that leadership is defined by helping individuals, teams, and organizations to accomplish way more than they could have anticipated accomplishing on their own. So some people say, well, that's really about inspiring and it's about motivation. That's true. I will agree with you. But at the end of the day, leadership is a key component of answering your question which is around how to align customers and organizations' expectations. And it comes through teams, customer focus, strategies, and products.
I definitely have to agree, and thank you for that. I thought I was well thought out and said, and I definitely agree with you when it comes to when we talk in terms of leadership and how we, of course, when people, of course, are going to be the forefront, and also having those teams. To me, you can't be a leader if there's no buy-in with your team. Yeah, you could be a team on paper, but if you're not operating as one with that common goal, that common mission, what you're trying to accomplish, you're not going to get much done. So yeah, definitely having that emphasis on team I think is very important, and making sure, like, again, everyone on that team brings a specific skill to the table and what they contribute to help the overall team win. So I mean, I think that's definitely important. So that makes
Absolutely. And it reminds me of, I'm going to call it pre-COVID days,
mhm,
when we were typically in an office. But I typically, whether it's COVID, pre-COVID, whatever, I have an open door policy. And so whether
right,
it's a physical door, a virtual door, or a phone door, so to speak,
right,
I want people to have the flexibility and willingness to give me a call, stop by, and share their views, whether it's around personal or professional matters, so that they feel more inclusive. And one of the terms you used earlier was around well-being.
right.
And regardless of your organization, large, small, public, private, government, nonprofit, people need to feel like they have a sense of belonging. And I
Absolutely.
believe from a leadership's perspective, culture starts at the top. It
Yep.
extends down in what a former board member of mine called mood in the middle. But at the end of the day,
Mm,
work gets done through the banter at the bottom. So if you think about an organization has a few senior leaders, it has more middle management, and it has a lot of people that are actually doing the important work. But it's tone at the top, through mood in the middle, and delivered across those who may be bantering at the bottom. And so you need
right.
to have a really strong culture that can nourish your strategies.
So with that said, and when we talk about leadership, your exceptional leadership at AGB led to a significant increase in revenue by broadening member engagement across various platforms. I was wondering if you could elaborate on a specific initiative or strategy that you implemented that played a pivotal role, in this growth, and how you ensured alignment and collaboration across different functions within the organization.
Well, I'm going to give you two different parts of that really amazing journey. The
Mm,
first part is just kind of reflecting upon the three A's that I mentioned earlier around assessing, aligning, and accelerating. Around assessing, kind of the basis there is that people on a team have different perspectives. So
right,
now I'm saying they have to all be the same, but they are different. And a leader needs to understand how his team is thinking.
right,
Then to the greatest degree possible, I'm doing this with my hands, need to align those mindsets around common goals, common priorities, and key initiatives, so that once the minds have been, the perspectives have been aligned, the mindsets have been, or excuse me, the perspectives has been assessed,
right.
the mindsets are aligned, you can then accelerate growth faster. So when I was interviewing for the AGB job 5 years ago, the board had asked me, "Hey, if you are afforded this opportunity to lead AGB, what are some of the things you may consider doing?" And there were three things that I shared, and three things that we actually did, Dr. Joseph. And I
Mm,
think they are all incredibly important to contributing to the outcomes of the organization's growth. The first thing that I shared was that I believe that AGB should create what I then called an AGB diversity strategy or diversity initiative. We did
okay.
that, but we didn't call it the diversity initiative. We called it the justice, equity, and inclusion initiative. And by the way, this started well before all the unrest occurred across the country. So this was something that I believe that I initiated with the board and our leadership team, and it's an ongoing journey. It was internal, it was external, it included publications, it included services, consulting services. It was woven into our search strategy because we had an executive search business, and it also was included in all of our programs, i.e., events. So that justice, equity, inclusion initiative, a continuous journey, both internally and externally, and was really impactful. And our members were very appreciative of what we did. That was number one. The second thing that we did was we really focused in on, again, back to what I mentioned earlier about aligning or deepening your understanding of the customer's motivations and priorities. We developed a product and a service called Principles of Trusteeship, because at the end of the day, a board, just like is a team, is the composition is made up of individual people. And yes, the board and the people in the aggregate form a board, and we need to provide leading practices around board governance. But the individuals need to understand what their roles and responsibilities are and what the expectations of key stakeholders are. So this Principles of Trusteeship resource was a digital and hard copy resource. It was woven into all of our programs, our consulting services, our executive search business, and it ended up being the most widely recognized, widely downloaded, most frequently purchased and read book in AGB's 100 years. So we talk about an unmet need.
Yeah.
It was the most frequently purchased book ever in 100 years. And it was published towards the tail end of that 100 years. And the third thing that we did was really kind of double down on strengthening the member value proposition. And all associations have membership services, and that's a revenue stream that's very important to them. But one of the things that I noticed is that there were some key gaps in strengthening that member value proposition. The first of which is what I call putting a moat around the jewels. So if you think about a castle, castles in the old days may have had a moat that surrounded that castle to restrict entry into the castle. So whether it's a moat or a wall, but there's some kind of protective barrier. Well, in our case, when I joined, there was no protective barrier. And so when you think about if I said, Dr. Joseph, I believe your board and you should join, and you may say, well, why should I? I can get all the goodies in the castle without joining. That was true.
Right.
So the first thing that we did is we put a moat around the castle, call that a firewall in the digital world.
There you go.
Because at the end of the day, you have to showcase exclusivity, or membership organizations need to showcase exclusivity. Right. Otherwise, there's no reason to join. They may think there is, but there really isn't. The second thing we did was we reinforced the value proposition by digitizing the majority of all of our analog and hard copy books and resources. So we put more into the castle, bigger, stronger, prettier, and more impactful. More people want to join and get into the castle. So at the end of the day, Dr. Joseph, the results of that experience were through three things around the Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, the Principles of Trusteeship Initiative, and also by strengthening the member value proposition, which in the aggregate enabled the enterprise to increase engagement and increase satisfaction.
It's huge.
Yeah, it was fun, a lot of fun. And again, it's back through the TCPS approach: teams, customers, products, and strategy.
I mean,
and the 3 A's, you assess, the align, and accelerate.
I mean, and basically, as you mentioned, I mean, you speak on it almost like pretty much down to a science, but essentially, you formulated a framework, and is able to, and you're doing it at scale, essentially. From what I'm hearing, you're able to use that and then continue to see, use it within the business and see how that grows. And also, when you mentioned about as far as, and that made a lot of sense to me when we talk about having that exclusivity as far as the reason as to why, future clients or potential clients to join or whatnot. If there's no incentive, or if you don't, or even sell on the incentive or as to why someone should join, as you said, there's no reason why someone would be able to do that, or why they would want to do that. So, I mean, I think just having that approach, having that strategy in place, and be able to execute on that, and from what you tell me, that was very successful. So I think that's pretty big.
We did the same thing using different words, but the similar approach when I was at NACD, which is the National Association of Corporate Directors. A lot of syllables, but it was the same TCPS approach. It was the same castle or same approach. The intent was to, illumine, sharpen, strengthen the castle through a moat. And it's, by the way, it's a semi-permeable moat. It's not an inswimmable or it's an unscalable wall. It is a sort of permeable. So you do let some people through to get some things. But at the end of the day, even at NACD, we tripled the size of that association in 7 years. When you think about tripling the size of an organization in 7 years, that's massive for people. And the revenue went from 10 to 35 or something like that million. We had to have moved 3 times the offices because we're just growing so fast. But it was because of exclusivity. It was around focus on the customer. We called them members in the association world, providing more value and making sure that the experience was memorable. I'm going to bring it all back to what I said right out of the gate, that culture nourishes strategy. And yes, Peter Drucker was right that it can't, that culture can eat strategy for breakfast, but I believe it can nourish it as well.
So, as yourself being a very successful entrepreneur, when we're talking about, as you founded student loans, what are some valuable lessons that you learned from that experience that continue to shape your approach to business development and also entrepreneurship today?
Well, I actually didn't found that business. I started it and developed it, but here's the background. So,
excuse me, my bad.
Loans, that's okay. Student Loans is owned by a company called Brazos Higher Education Service Corp. Another long name, a lot of syllables. Brazos has been around for 40 years or something like that. Brazos is a financial services company that purchases portfolios of student loans, and then they securitize them, mortgages and car loans and credit cards. But they purchase these portfolios of loans. They have to be student, and they securitize them, and you can rinse, wash, repeat. One of the companies that they purchased came with a URL called studentloans.com. But anyway, Brazos did not have any marketing, specifically digital marketing and communications expertise. And so I was introduced to them. Long story short, I joined them, and they said, "Hey, Henry, you've got all this digital communications experience. Why don't you develop this?" And I did. The key lessons to your point: partnerships are essential. So just like when I talk about TCPS and teams and customers, etc., partnerships are critically important, because with most organizations, you do not employ all of the resources that you need to make your business work. Just like you're using Riverside for this studio here. You don't own Riverside. You're probably subscribing to Riverside. But in our case, we had partners, we had stakeholders that helped us develop it. But the way we built that business was via the TCPS approach. We needed to build or form and establish a great team, whether they're employees, contractors, partners, etc., service partners. Number 2 is we needed to make sure that we created a value proposition that was unique. And when we went into that market, there was 9 private lenders who were originating federally guaranteed student loans. So it's a very crowded market, or was. Now, today in this age, because of Obamacare, they stopped our business. Thank you. And there were a lot of other good things that came out of Obamacare, but that's not one of them. Was that he said the government's going to get into the student loan business, and you know what's happened now. At the end of the day, we formed a great team. We really understood how we could be unique and differentiate our products and services, and then we deployed that, and then we executed via a great inclusive strategy. But it was data informed, customer informed along the way. My biggest lessons learned are try, learn, evolve. Try, learn, and evolve. Many of my fellow employees have heard me talk about, what is the greatest source of wisdom? And the answer there's many potential answers. One of them that I think about is mistakes. People are not perfect. Just don't do it twice. Learn from your mistakes, evolve, and continue the journey.
And I think that's a great point. When we're talking about, and I think that's something that could apply to anyone along their journey. When we're talking about even with cybersecurity, where they're trying to get started with their cybersecurity journey, or they're transferring from, pivoting from a different career field, whatnot. And I think, and also when I reflect on my own career when I got started, because for me as an Air Force veteran, I served 4 years in the Air Force, and after that, I've been serving civil government service ever since. And And I didn't start out doing IT and cyber. I started out doing HVAC, heat and ventilation, air conditioning. So I was an HVAC technician in the Air Force, and about 5 or 6 years in my first government or civil government position, working at the VA in New Jersey. And when I finally broke through, I give a lot of credit to my very first supervisor. Even to this day, we stay in contact because he allowed me to fail. And I think that's something that a lot of leadership, especially I say, and I'm just keeping it within cyber. I can't speak for all different vectors, but within cybersecurity, I think that's kind of lost now, because I think now it's like they're looking for that unicorn, that person who could just do everything, right out the gate. And I think that's really unrealistic, because it puts a lot of pressure on folks that are really who have that hunger, that are willing to learn. They understand that they may not have everything right now, but hey, give me a chance. I could do it. I can show improve. And like I said, unfortunately, I think that's starting to be lost now. Because that was very helpful for me, coming up, just being very green, just learning everything. And, I made mistakes, but he allowed me to fail. And it made me better because of that, because I was able to grow from that. You understand, okay, this did not work. All right, I won't do that again. And then you're able to learn, you become better. And also with that, you're able to teach. You're able to be a better teacher, in my view, because you can tell people coming behind you and say, hey, I did that. Don't do that. You know what I'm saying? Right. That didn't work out great for me, so it's not going to work out great for you. And I think that's how we can continue. It's almost like that circle. We can become better engineers, cybersecurity professionals, whatever field it is. I think we have to make room for mistakes. Of course, again, yeah, you don't want to keep making the same ones over and over. Yeah, I think that's a little crazy, but we do have to have some room, some wiggle room to say, hey, all right, I understand you messed up here. Learn from it. What did you learn from it? And then move on, and help to help you grow. So I definitely love what you said there. And hopefully we start to see, like I said, we need to see more of that as we really trying to, especially we're talking about trying to bolster, cybersecurity teams. We need to have that room. We need to allow folks to essentially fail, so that way they can learn and grow.
Well, it reminds me of kind of two different things. One is related to your question earlier around, how do we substantially grow both AGB and NACD? And I talked about the moat, and value, and diversity, equity, inclusion, things of that
right.
nature. The piece that I didn't mention, well, there are two things that I didn't mention. One is the importance of the board-president partnership. The board-president partnership, and this is going to dovetail into cybersecurity, which I know is the cornerstone of your show here. But the board-president partnership, specifically the board chair president, I'm saying president instead of president and CEO, which in my case is the same. Right. But the board-president partnership is an incredibly important linkage and a key to aligning, back to your word from a little earlier, aligning the organization with the customer. And in both cases at AGB and NACD, we were aligning our anticipated outcomes with desired and prioritized outcomes of our members. At AGB, as you know, boards of colleges and universities oversee student living and learning experiences. Well, the outcome is graduation and learning, and establishing the desire for students and their communities to become lifelong learners. Well, we put student success into our vision statement. And yes, the organization is focused on governance, but the outcome is around student success. And so that's one key piece. The second piece I was going to mention is around, which relates to cyber and business and any kind of organization, is what I mentioned earlier around kind of the 3 R's. I know I mentioned the 3 A's around assess, align, and accelerate, right. But the 3 R's are around rehearse, respond, and recover. And so in the cyber world, about 15 years ago, I worked with a gentleman by the name of Larry Clinton. And Larry Clinton is the president of an organization called the ISA, the Internet Security Alliance. And the first thing that Larry shared with me is that cybersecurity is an enterprise risk. It's not the responsibility only of a specific person or team or function. It's an enterprise-wide risk. and an enterprise-wide responsibility. Now, that responsibility needs to be rehearsed because at the end of the day, unfortunately, as you know, Dr. Joseph, cybersecurity attacks and intrusions will happen. And if you don't think it's happened to your organization, you're probably uninformed. Because they happen, whether they're large or small, whether they come from some adversary from overseas around the world. But usually those adversaries enter your premises digitally through some kind of a phishing attack. And so at the end of the day, that's why, if you think about it, you've got lots of employees are using this tool called email. And the easiest way for an intruder to come in is to spoof your email, use a different email address and say, hey, compensation. Everybody's going to click on that. Guess what? They now have the keys to the castle. They penetrated your semi-permeable moat, and they're in the house. So at the end of the day, you need to prepare, i.e. rehearse. When it happens, you then can recover and respond accordingly. So really, really important to rehearse, respond, and recover, because in that rehearsing part is incredibly important. Back to culture.
Right.
Culture nourishes strategy. And at the end, if you embrace this, back to the learning, making mistakes, if you rehearse, just like you did in the Air Force and I did in the Marine Corps, and as the Marine Corps is part of the Navy, we rehearsed all the time. It's called training.
Yep.
And whether it's shooting, dropping bombs, doing kind of other kinds of military-related activities, planes, tanks, artillery, you need to train. And that's what I call rehearse. And in our case, we rehearsed with the FBI, other federal agents, local law enforcement, etc. You have to have marketing and communications at the table, so that if you're the CEO, Dr. Joseph, and something happens, and I was your CISO, and I went to you and I said, hey, guess what? Systems are down because we got attacked. Boom. You don't want to then start writing the press release. You don't want to then just start writing your email to the board. You want to have it written. Yes, you can have some holes in it, but you want to have through rehearsal, you can then say, this is what happened, here's what we're doing about it, and stay tuned for next steps. So rehearsal is incredibly important so that you can respond effectively and efficiently, and at the end of the day, you recover.
Yeah, and through all that, I think the biggest part that I take away from that is just being prepared. Preparation is key. So as you mentioned, going through your rehearsing. Once you have that preparation done, it makes everything else that much easier. Because you already know what to expect, you know what to do.
Heard this. Yeah, you may have heard this in the Air Force, but I've shared it with my kids as well. By the way, I don't think I let you know, but my wife and I have 5 kids.
Oh wow!
And they're just fabulous. The oldest is 32, youngest is 25. So 5 within 7 years. It's a tight knit Brady bunch.
There you go.
I talked to them about the 6 P's. And I don't know if you've heard about the 6 P's, and you can tell I'm into the 3s and the X's and whatnot.
Yeah.
Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance. So that's 5 P's.
Oh, there you go.
So maybe that's a bad word that I shouldn't have said on your show.
No, you're good.
Preparation prevents poor performance. And at the end of the day, it's all about training and rehearsing.
Absolutely. So as we stay on top of with cyber, how has cybersecurity, would you say, impacted your career, like business endeavors and lifestyle?
Well, unfortunately, I was negatively impacted by a cyber attack about 15 years ago. And when I was the CMO at NACD, I was also in charge of business development and our partnerships business. And we were using a cloud solution. So it wasn't on premise, it was a cloud service that we were using to store all of our customer data. Not all of it, but some of our customer activities. And we used that for planning for the future. So again, it wasn't our email. But we lost access to these shared files that we used every single day. And I forget if it was a weekend or a weekday, but at the end of the day, somebody came to me and said, Henry, we can no longer access these files, which we use every single day. And we had to pay a couple $1 million to recover. And so at the end of the day, thankfully we had insurance, and there's different ways. And I learned very clearly from our partners up at AIG that you can try to put a moat around and protect some of your assets, some of the things. And so, but you have to prioritize which assets you're going to protect. And then you have to put insurance have insurance to cover those that you don't think you can cover. And then there's some things you can't protect. And that's just a risk management, risk management approach to protecting your most valuable assets. But I learned very clearly that, cyber is the real deal. And when you rely on some files to do your business and you don't have them in paper in front of you and they're shared and they get stolen, it's hard to get them back. And in that case, it costs us a lot of money to get them back.
Yeah, and that's definitely a very unfortunate situation. We hear about cyber attacks, breaches all the time. It's honestly, it's almost to the point where I know, at least for me, just quite numb to it. It's almost like you're expecting, okay, it's like you turn on TV to see what the sports score is. Okay, what's the next breach today? I mean, that's pretty much kind of where it's at. I mean, it's unfortunate, but as you mentioned, I think a lot of times that we even take for granted, the systems and processes that we have, that we use every day, and once it's taken away or not available, we don't know what to do almost, because I even remember a cyber attack a couple of years ago. I think it was the city of Atlanta, and their city government, they were pretty much reduced to pen and paper because their systems were down. Yeah, I mean, I think this really just goes to show just how important it is, talking about protecting our cybersecurity infrastructure, make sure that our security posture is strong, and that we are taking, having those mitigation steps. So as you mentioned, we're talking about risk management, having those mitigation steps in place to say, okay, if this happens, this is what we do. Boom, if B goes down, then we have C to back up. So and hopefully, especially even for like young organizations that are getting started, to have that risk management process in place. I think some organizations may not think about that, but that's definitely important, because you can't just take for granted that that process or that system is always going to be there. You have to be prepared for in the event that it does go down. Okay, then what are you going to do?
Absolutely. I mean, what you're kind of getting at is BCP, business continuity planning.
Right.
And over my 30 years of work, and it makes me sound old when I said 30 years of work, but I'm still young.
Seasoned. Vet.
I don't even like that. But anyway, experienced. How about that?
There you go.
All companies, back in the pre-COVID world, when people were working in the office all the time, you did fire drills. Okay, well, that's a form of mitigating risk.
Right.
Because if you do have a fire, okay, what do people got to do? They have to go down the stairwell, etc. In your case, we're talking about cyber risk, which is a component of enterprise risk. And all of them, that BCP, the business continuity planning, they all have elements of rehearsing, whether it's a fire or a flood. In some cases, you've probably been at work sometimes and the internet goes down. Well, if you're relying upon this thing called email or the internet for doing your business, which most people are,
right,
and your internet goes down, that's not a good thing. So you
right,
have to, what are you going to do if it does happen? A lot of cases, well, you have your cell phone or you have an iPad or something like that that you can utilize to mitigate that risk. But it is rehearsing. We did this, used to call them tabletop exercises in the Marine Corps, where we'd have like a big sandbox, so to speak, and you could have hills and streams and rivers and mountains, and you could play around with your Tonka toys and your tanks and your people, and you say, what are you going to do if this happens? And how are you going to respond if this happens? And at the end of the day, rehearse, respond, and recover, so that your organization can maintain its distinction, its value to customers, and engagement with stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, as I mentioned to you earlier, culture nourishes strategy, and rehearsal is all about culture.
What are some obstacles you've had to overcome for you to get to where you are today?
I'll give you 3 of them, and I'll just use them. So first of all, an obstacle is time. So I'm going to say time, priorities, and alignment. Or maybe I should say time alignment and priorities. Time alignment and priorities. We all have the same amount of time in our day. Whether you're young, seasoned, whatever your part of life is, you only have the same 24 hours. And as your life goes on, you said I'm seasoned and I have 5 kids. I want to do a lot of things in my day. I want to spend time with my kids, with my lovely wife, with our 2 fantastic dogs, and my colleagues at work. And, oh, by the way, I have these things called hobbies. So I'd say the first barrier is a limited amount of time, and everybody has that. But I think it's important to admit that, because when you acknowledge the most common limitations to everyone's life, which is time, you then have to prioritize. So the second one, and that prioritize goes into the second thing I mentioned, alignment. I may think we should do certain things, but others may not have that same alignment. I mentioned to you at AGB how we grew and we had different initiatives and we strengthened value propositions, and the outcome was successful. But it wasn't like it was a smooth, kind of a flat, smooth road. Different people have different perspectives, and you have to take the time to assess perspectives and to ensure that you're using the right terminology. So I know I talked about alignment, but alignment happens through time, and it also happens through the appropriate use of words. Because if I said dark and you might cloudy, I mean, it's just, I'm thinking out loud here. But the appropriate use of words and to align expectations. And the last one was around outcomes. And so I meant time, alignment, and outcomes, i.e. priorities. You need to make sure that the team that has limited resources, limited time, and probably an exhaustive list of expectations, but you prioritize that strategy accordingly. So those are some of the challenges, but they're not unique to my life and my work experience. Everybody has limitations on time. Everybody has challenges around aligning perspectives, and everyone has challenges associated with priorities.
Good.
But the key is to acknowledge, just like we talked about before,
Right,
around mistakes. Nobody's perfect. You want to make a mistake once. You want to learn from it. You want to share what you learned and move on so that you can adapt, improvise, and overcome. That was, by the way, I didn't make up that adapt, improvise, and overcome. That was something I learned in the Marine Corps. You may have heard that in the Army, Air Force.
Yeah.
But you think you're going to go this way, but you get a block wall, so you have to pivot and turn and
Right.
adapt, improvise, and overcome.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. Those obstacles are always going to be there. They're always going to come at you. So I don't think you could ever have that be of mind to say that, oh, like nothing's ever going to happen to me, whatever. No, things will happen. Things will come at you, and you just have to be ready. And I think what the main thing is how you respond. Like, what do you do to respond to it? Because, like I said, it's going to come. Adversity is going to hit you in one way or another. And what matters most is, are you just going to just take it, or are you going to, like I said, as you mentioned, adapt and overcome? Because that's the only way you're going to keep moving forward. You can't let it stop you.
You used the word kind of resilience in there, or maybe you didn't. The word crept into my mind. But yeah, part of being adaptive and is resilience and agile.
Right.
A frequently used term is pivot, things of those natures. But I think it's important to learn from your.
So I have a real tough question for you.
One other thing I mentioned that your last question that I think is so important.
Yeah.
My mother recently passed away, unfortunately. But one of the things that I learned from my mother is the power of your mind and the power of positivity. So you asked, your question earlier was around what have you learned and barriers and things of that nature. I think one of the things that I've learned, the barrier has been sometimes people have negative perspectives. I personally despise negativity. I embrace positivity. And what I do is try to control the one thing that you and I and everyone can control, and that is your attitude. I believe that the most positively infectious part of leadership is having a positive mental attitude that we can. It may be hard. It admit truth.
Yeah.
It'd be a realist.
Right.
I'm not saying don't admit, tough times ahead, but at the end of the day, control what you can control. And that number one thing that people can control is their attitude, and maintain a positive mental attitude as you're working through challenging times.
Yeah. And I had a real tough question for you, but I'm going to ask it. So what is your favorite coffee that gets you through the day?
Well, I love coffee. My favorite coffee from I'll give you a flavor and a brand.
Okay.
The flavor is Colombian. I like dark, rich Colombian coffee.
Yeah.
And number two, I love Melita coffee.
Melita,
because
okay.
It's really finely ground, and I'm not being paid to say that, by the way. You just asked me a question and I'm responding. Probably because I've back to my rehearse and respond and recover. I've enjoyed Melita coffee for 30 some years, and I'm a Colombian Melita drinker.
That's your go-to. And just lastly, like just for our listeners, just learn a little more insight on you. And it's been a great conversation. But like, what are some things you like to do outside of work? Some hobbies. Like, what are some of your interests? Like I said, that you like to do outside of the office.
Great question. I came up with this thinking a few years ago called my F's, my 4 F's. So you're probably tired of me saying 3 of this and 4 of that.
No.
But there's 4 F's: faith, family, fitness, and fun. Again, back to this thing called time. When you asked me about the challenges, we have limited time. But I start my day and I end my day by praying, because I think faith is really important in life. Now, people have different faiths. That's fine. Very accepting of that. Family, incredibly important. I mentioned to you about my mother, about my 5 kids, my wonderful wife, my brother and sister and aunts, and then friends. You're kind of surrounding your moat with all these wonderful people, and you got to have fun while you're doing it, because at the end of the day, we have limited time on this planet. I'm not going to go negative on you. But realize that we have limited time, and through faith, family, fitness, and fun, you can be good. So that's how I try to spend my time when I'm not working.
No, that's good. And I think we all need, an outlet. Because even when we talked about, I think one of my previous episodes, Dr. Holiday Bell, and she's a sleep specialist, and she talked about the effectiveness of sleep, and we talked about burnout within the cybersecurity field, and I think that's key. I think you bring great points. Is that we do have a limited time on this earth, and we do have to look for things that brings us joy, making sure that we are getting the rest and be able to, even kind of, one of your R's, talk about recover. Our bodies need to recover. We're not machines. As much as we like to think we are, we're still human beings. We need time to, like I said, to recharge our own internal batteries. And like I said, do the things that bring us joy, whether, you're going out bowling, read a comic book or going fishing, like whatever it is that, like I said, that brings you joy, and that way you could get back when you get back into the office and doing what you have to do. You feel good, refreshed, and like I said, you're not mentally burnt out. So
absolutely. But think about those F's, whether it's 4 or 5. But faith, family, fitness, and faith, family, fitness,
fun,
friends. I forgot the friends and fun.
Okay.
So 5 F's. 5 F's. Faith, family, friends, fitness, and fun. That's really important. Great way to end this podcast. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
It was great. I definitely appreciate you taking the time, spending with me today, and definitely a treat for our listeners. I think there was some great points that you mentioned, especially from the business perspective as well. So I think that was great. And again, Henry, I appreciate you coming through. And I thank you, those listening and watching to the podcast. So thank you for tuning in to the Cyber Coffee Hour. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on all of our platforms. You can also find the Cyber Coffee Hour on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. That is a wrap, and catch you on the next one. Later.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph.
From